The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Talos Prime, and Captain Jake Morrison looked out at his first alien world. He had seen pictures before, studied maps and files, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. The planet was mostly blue and green, with 3 small moons orbiting around it. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place that had never known real war. Jake turned away from the window and walked through the narrow corridor of the Valiant. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Behind him, 11 other soldiers followed. They were Shadow Team 6, the best special operations unit Earth had ever produced. Each man and woman on his team had trained for years. They could move through enemy territory like ghosts. They could fight with weapons or without them. They could survive anywhere under any conditions, but none of them had ever fought aliens before. The Dalari people who lived on Talos Prime looked almost human, except their skin had a slight purple tint and their eyes were larger. They stood in neat rows when Shadow Team 6 walked down the ramp. Their military uniforms were bright blue with gold trim. Everything about them seemed formal and organized. Colonel Amy Vasquez, the human military liaison, was already on the planet. She had arrived 3 days earlier to meet with the Dalari leaders. She walked up to Jake and shook his hand. "Captain Morrison," she said. "Welcome to Talos Prime. I hope you're ready for this." "Ready for what, ma'am?" Jake asked. Amy smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Ready to teach these people what war actually means." The Dalari General Korath stepped forward. He was tall, even for his species, and wore more medals on his chest than Jake could count. "Captain Morrison," he said in perfect English, "we are honored to have human warriors assist us against the Krell threat." Jake nodded respectfully. "Thank you, General. My team is ready to help however we can." "Excellent," Korath said. "Come, we will show you the battle plans." The command center was underground, deep beneath the capital city. Screens covered every wall, showing maps and data. Dozens of Dalari officers worked at computers, their movements precise and practiced. Korath pointed to a large map on the main screen. "The Krell have taken Dalmar Station on our 3rd moon. They will attack from there in 14 days. We have prepared defensive positions here, here, and here." He indicated 3 locations on the map. "Our forces will meet theirs on the open field designated for combat. We estimate the battle will last approximately 8 hours. Jake stared at the map. Then he looked at Amy. She gave him a small nod. "General," Jake said carefully, "you know exactly when they're going to attack?" "Of course," Korath said. "They announced it 3 days ago. It is proper protocol under the Vryn Accords. Both sides must agree on the time and place of battle." "And they told you they're staging from Dalmar Station?" "Yes. Transparency is required in all military engagements between Council species." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. These people didn't understand war at all. They understood games. They understood rules. But war had no rules. War was about survival. "General," Jake said slowly, "what if we didn't wait 14 days? What if we hit Dalmar Station tonight?" Every Dalari in the room stopped working. They all turned to look at Jake. The silence was heavy. "That would be dishonorable," Korath said. His voice was shocked. "The Krell have announced their intention to fight in 14 days. We must respect that announcement." "The Krell are going to kill your people," Jake said. "A lot of them. You said the battle will last 8 hours. How many casualties do you expect?" Korath looked uncomfortable. "Between 30 and 40,000 deaths. Perhaps more. It depends on how well both sides fight." "And you think that's acceptable?" "It is the cost of war, Captain Morrison." Jake looked at his team. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. He had trained with these men and women for 5 years. He knew each of them better than he knew his own family. They could do things that would seem impossible to anyone who hadn't seen them in action. "General," Jake said, "give me 60 hours. Don't tell anyone outside this room. Let me show you a different way." Korath looked at Amy. She nodded. "Trust him," she said. "This is what humans do." The Krell Crimson Guard had 500 soldiers on Dalmar Station. They were the elite warriors of their species, each one standing over 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating. They were strong, fast, and trained since birth to fight. Shadow Team 6 approached the station 3 days later, hidden inside a debris field that orbited the moon. They wore suits that made them invisible to most sensors. They moved slowly, carefully, letting the natural motion of space rocks carry them closer. Lieutenant Ben Harris floated next to Jake. Through his helmet radio, his voice was calm. "This is crazy, boss." "Probably," Jake agreed. "I like it." They attached to the station's hull at 4 different points. The Krell had guards watching the main airlocks, but they never thought to watch the maintenance hatches. Why would they? No one had ever attacked a military installation before it declared battle time. It would be dishonorable. Jake opened the hatch with a laser cutter that made no sound in the vacuum of space. Inside, the station's corridors were empty. The Krell were all asleep or preparing for the battle that was supposed to happen in 11 days. Shadow Team 6 split into 4 groups. They had studied the station's layout for 3 days. They knew where every critical system was located. They knew the guard rotation schedules. They knew where the ammunition was stored, where the life support controls were, where the command computers operated. Jake's group moved through the maintenance tunnels. These passages were narrow, meant for repair robots, not soldiers. But special operations soldiers learned to move through tight spaces. They crawled for nearly an hour, placing small explosive charges every 50 meters. Harris led his group to the life support controls. They didn't destroy anything. They just reprogrammed the system. In 6 hours, the oxygen mix would change. Not enough to kill anyone, just enough to make everyone very sleepy. Sergeant Lisa Chen took her team to the communication center. They installed a small device that would scramble all outgoing messages when activated. The last team, led by Corporal Dan Martinez, reached the defensive turret controls. They uploaded new targeting parameters. The turrets would now recognize Krell biosignatures as hostile targets. 3 hours after they entered the station, Shadow Team 6 left. They drifted back into the debris field and returned to the Valiant. The Krell never knew they had been there. 60 hours after Jake's conversation with General Korath, at exactly the time Jake had specified, Shadow Team 6 activated everything at once. The explosions were small but perfectly placed. They didn't kill anyone, but they destroyed ammunition depots, fuel reserves, and power conduits. The life support system made everyone drowsy and confused. The communications went dead, and the defensive turrets, thinking they were under attack, began firing at the Krell soldiers. The Crimson Guard tried to respond, but nothing worked properly. Their weapons had no ammunition. Their ships had no fuel. Their commanders couldn't communicate. Their own base was attacking them. In 16 minutes, the Krell abandoned Dalmar Station. They fled in escape pods, confused and terrified. They had lost their staging ground without understanding how or why. General Korath watched it all happen on the command center screens. When it was over, he turned to Jake. His large eyes were wide with something that might have been fear or wonder or both. "You defeated 500 Crimson Guard without killing anyone," he said. "That was the point, General," Jake said. "War doesn't have to mean death. Sometimes it just means winning." But even as he said it, Jake saw the looks on the Dalari faces around him. They weren't grateful. They were scared. And he realized that maybe he had just taught the galaxy something it wasn't ready to learn. The Galactic Council building was enormous. It floated in space between 3 star systems, a massive structure that housed representatives from 247 different species. Ambassador Claire Richardson walked through corridors that had been built long before humans even discovered fire. Everything about this place was designed to make visitors feel small. Claire didn't feel small. She felt angry. The trial chamber was circular with seats rising up on all sides. In the center was a single platform where the accused would stand. Claire walked to that platform and looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her. Some looked curious. Some looked hostile. Most looked afraid. Prosecutor Then stood on the opposite side of the chamber. He was a Vix with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had been part of the council for 8,000 years. They knew every law, every precedent, every rule. "Ambassador Richardson," Then said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "humanity stands accused of violating the Vryn Accord, Section 7, Paragraph 12. You have conducted warfare in a manner that is dishonorable, deceptive, and fundamentally incompatible with civilized military engagement. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Claire said. Her voice was steady. "Because the laws you cite were never designed for the kind of war we fight." A murmur ran through the chamber. The council speaker, an ancient being called Eldest Mora, raised one hand. "Ambassador, you admit that your forces attacked Dalmar Station before the agreed-upon battle time?" I admit that our forces neutralized a military threat with minimal casualties. That is not what was asked. Then yes, Claire said. Captain Morrison and Shadow Team 6 acted 3 days before the Krell expected them to. They saved approximately 40,000 lives by doing so. They acted without honor, said Senator Quillix, a Vordani representative. His species had been warriors for 6,000 years. They struck from shadows. They used deception and trickery. These are not the actions of soldiers. These are the actions of criminals. These are the actions of professionals, Claire said. My people have been fighting wars for thousands of years, real wars. Wars where the only rule is survival. And that is precisely why you are dangerous, Then said. He activated a holographic display. It showed footage from Dalmar Station, the explosions, the chaos, the Krell fleeing in panic. Look at what your Captain Morrison did. He attacked an enemy that trusted him to follow the established protocols. He used tactics that the Krell could not have anticipated because no honorable species would use such tactics. He saved lives, Claire said again. He brought terror to this galaxy, then replied, and terror, Ambassador, is a weapon we banned 14,000 years ago. The chamber fell silent. Claire felt the weight of those words. She knew what Then was doing. He was painting humanity as monsters, as beings who broke the fundamental rules of civilization. May I present a witness? Claire asked. Eldest Mora nodded. You may. Lieutenant Ben Harris walked onto the platform. He wore his dress uniform, and he looked small compared to many of the aliens in the chamber. But he stood straight, his head high. Lieutenant Harris, Claire said, tell the council what happened on Dalmar Station. Ben looked up at the hundreds of watching faces. We infiltrated the station at 0300 hours. Our mission was to neutralize it as a staging ground for the Krell attack. We planted charges on non-essential systems. We reprogrammed life support to create mild hypoxia, enough to slow reaction times but not enough to cause permanent harm. We altered defensive turret programming to create confusion. We completed our mission and extracted without engaging any enemy personnel directly. How many Krell did you kill? Then asked. 17, Ben said. All accidental casualties from the explosions. We designed the charges to minimize risk to life. And if you had fought them in open battle as the Accords require, how many would have died? Ben looked at Then directly. Estimates suggested 40,000 combined casualties over an 8-hour engagement. Maybe more. You deny the enemy their chance to fight with honor, Quillix said. You deny them the right to face their attackers. We deny them the right to die, Ben said quietly. Sir, I've read your species' military history. The Battle of Quinn's Field, 3,000 years ago. 2 million warriors met in honorable combat. At the end of the day, 900,000 were dead. You built monuments to those who died. You wrote songs about their bravery. But they're still dead. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Eldest Mora had to strike her gavel repeatedly to restore order. You understand nothing of honor, Quillix shouted. Maybe not, Ben said. But I understand that my job isn't to die bravely. It's to complete the mission and bring my team home alive. If that means I hide in shadows and strike when the enemy isn't looking, then that's what I'll do. Because I'd rather be called a coward by people who are alive than be remembered as a hero by people who are dead. Claire touched Ben's shoulder, a signal that he had said enough. He saluted the council and left the platform. The prosecution rests, Then said. Humanity has admitted to violating the Accords. The penalty for such violations is expulsion from the council and cessation of all military activities in council space. Eldest Mora looked at Claire. Does the defense have anything more to present? Claire activated her own holographic display. Yes, I want to show the council something. Images appeared in the air above the platform. Old images from Earth. Black and white footage of soldiers charging across muddy fields while explosions tore them apart. Color videos of cities burning. Recordings of nuclear mushroom clouds rising into the sky. This is humanity's history, Claire said. We have fought wars that killed millions. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We learned through blood and fire that there are no rules in war. There is only survival or extinction. More images appeared. More recent ones. Soldiers in modern gear. Moving through buildings with practiced efficiency. Drones striking targets with precision. Special forces teams extracting hostages without firing a shot. And then we learned something else, Claire continued. We learned that the best warriors aren't the ones who kill the most enemies. They're the ones who end fights with the fewest deaths. Captain Morrison and Shadow Team 6 represent the pinnacle of human military evolution. They don't fight to kill. They fight to win, and winning means everyone goes home. This is sophistry, Thin said. You dress up your violations with pretty words, but the facts remain. You broke the Accords. The Accords were written by species who had never faced real war, Claire said. You wrote rules for games, not survival. And now you're angry because we showed you that your rules don't work against people who actually want to win. We should vote now, Quillick said. Humanity must be punished. But before Eldest Mora could call for a vote, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed. A Delari aide ran in, his face pale with panic. The Krell have launched a full assault, he said. 3 battle fleets. They're attacking 6 neutral worlds simultaneously. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives were shouting, demanding action, calling for their militaries to mobilize. Eldest Mora struck her gavel again and again. Order, she shouted. We must respond to this aggression. The Vryn will mobilize their fleet according to protocol. That will take 30 days, the Vryn fleet master said. We must gather our forces, plan our strategy, and present our declaration of intent to the Krell. 30 days? The Delari aide said. The attacked worlds don't have 30 hours. The Krell are targeting civilians. They're not following any protocols. They're just killing everyone. All eyes turned to Claire. She knew what they were thinking. They had just spent hours condemning human tactics, and now they wanted human help. Ambassador Richardson, Eldest Mora said. Will humanity assist in this crisis? Claire looked around the chamber, at the faces that had been judging her, at Then, who had called her people criminals, at Quillicks, who had questioned their honor. I need to make some calls, she said. 12 hours later, Colonel Dan Rivers arrived in council space with the 2nd Marine Recon Battalion, 400 soldiers, specialists in unconventional warfare. They didn't come with massive ships or huge armies. They came with knowledge, skill, and a complete disregard for the old rules of war. Dan met with Claire in a secure room on the council station. He was shorter than Jake Morrison, with gray hair and scars on his hands. He had been fighting wars since before some council species had discovered space travel. What's the situation? He asked. Claire showed him the tactical maps. 6 worlds under attack, millions of civilians at risk. The Krell forces were massive, overwhelming, and brutal. The Council wants us to engage the fleets directly, Claire said. Fight them in open space according to the Accords. Dan looked at her. What do you want us to do? I want you to end this war, Claire said. Fast, clean, with as few deaths as possible on both sides. Even after they just tried to put you on trial? Especially after that, Claire said. Because I want to prove that we're not monsters. That we can use these tactics responsibly. Dan nodded slowly. Then we don't fight their fleets. We fight their will to keep fighting. 6 months had passed since the Krell withdrew their fleets. They hadn't lost a single battle in space. They had lost something worse. They had lost trust in their own command structure, their own intelligence reports, their own communications. Colonel Dan Rivers and his battalion had infiltrated their networks, planted false information, and created so much chaos that the Krell leadership couldn't tell truth from lies anymore. The 3 battle fleets returned home not because they were defeated, but because they no longer knew who to believe. The galaxy learned a new kind of fear that day. It wasn't the fear of losing a battle. It was the fear of fighting an enemy who could make you destroy yourself. Major Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the transport ship heading toward Perthos 7. She was 32 years old, had been in special operations for 9 years, and had completed 47 missions without losing a single team member. That record was something she thought about every day, every night before sleep, every morning when she woke up. 5 minutes to orbit, the pilot announced. Lisa turned to her team. Ghost Company consisted of 30 operators, each one trained in hostage rescue, close quarters combat, and surgical precision operations. They wore black armor that could adapt to any environment. They carried weapons that could be lethal or non-lethal depending on the situation, but more than equipment, they carried responsibility. Every mission they ran, people's lives depended on them making the right choices in fractions of a second. Status check, Lisa said, her second in command. Captain Kevin Ford pulled up the tactical display. Zorvat Syndicate has 200 Althaxi civilians in a mining compound. 17 guards confirmed. They're demanding the release of their leader from prison, and threatening to execute hostages if their demands aren't met. Time limit? 26 hours. Lisa studied the compound layout. It was a converted mining facility, 3 levels deep into an asteroid. Limited entry points. Narrow corridors. Easy to defend, hard to breach. The Althaxi government wants us to storm it, Kevin said. Full assault. They've offered to provide support troops. No, Lisa said. We do this clean. The Althaxi commander, a nervous being named Telvik, met them at the orbital station. His people were shorter than humans, with green skin and large ears. They looked delicate, peaceful, not the kind of species that dealt well with violence. Major Chen, Telvik said, his voice shaking. Thank you for coming. The Zorvat are monsters. They've already killed 3 hostages to prove they're serious. We need to attack now before they kill more. Commander, we need to be patient, Lisa said. Rushing in will get people killed. But waiting might also get people killed. Lisa understood his fear. She had felt it before. The terrible weight of knowing that people were suffering and you had the power to do something about it. But power used poorly was worse than no power at all. Give me 48 hours, she said. Don't contact the Zorvat. Don't do anything that might spook them. Just let us work. For the next 2 days, Ghost Company watched the compound. They used micro-drones smaller than insects to map every room, every corridor, every guard position. They tracked patrol patterns down to the second. They identified where the hostages were being kept, where the guards slept, where the compound's power systems were located. Lisa spent those 2 days memorizing everything. She knew that guard number 7 always stopped at the same corner to adjust his equipment. She knew that guard number 12 was left-handed and kept his weapon on the wrong side for a fast draw. She knew that the hostages were being kept in 3 separate rooms on the second level, and that the guards changed shifts every 6 hours at precisely 3 minutes past the hour. Knowledge was the real weapon. Bullets and explosives were just tools. On the 3rd night, Ghost Company moved. They approached the compound from 6 different directions, using the asteroid's irregular surface to hide their approach. Each team had specific objectives. Each operator knew exactly what they had to do. Lisa led Team 1 through a ventilation shaft that the guards had never bothered to secure. Why would they? No one had ever attacked a hostage situation with this kind of precision before. Inside the compound, the air was thick and warm. Lisa could hear voices echoing through the corridors. Zorvat guards talking, laughing, not worried at all. They thought they were safe. They thought they had all the power. Team 1 reached guard post 3 at exactly 0314. The guard was looking the other way. Corporal Sam Peters moved like a shadow coming up behind him. The neural stunner made no sound. The guard dropped without even knowing he had been attacked. 5 other teams moved at the same time. In 90 seconds, 6 guards were unconscious. The compound's communication system was jammed. The power was still on, but control of it had been transferred to Ghost Company's systems. The remaining 11 guards realized something was wrong, but they didn't know what. They started shouting into their radios, getting no response. They ran toward the guard posts and found their companions unconscious. Panic set in. Lisa watched them through her helmet display. She could have killed every guard in the compound without them ever seeing her team. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was to save lives, all lives, even the bad guys if possible. Team 2 used sonic disruptors at guard post 7. The sound was carefully calibrated to cause extreme discomfort without permanent damage. 3 guards dropped to their knees, hands over their ears. Team 2 secured them quickly, using restraints that couldn't be broken. Team 3 encountered a problem. 2 guards had taken defensive positions with hostages as shields. They were shouting threats, promising to kill the civilians if anyone came closer. Lisa spoke into her comm. Team 3, hold position. Team 5, what's your status? We have access to the compound's fire suppression system, Team 5 leader reported. Activate it in Corridor 9 only. Give them something to worry about besides us. Water began pouring from the ceiling in Corridor 9. The 2 guards with hostages looked up, confused. Were they under attack? Was it a malfunction? They didn't know, and that confusion was enough. Lisa's team moved through the artificial fog created by the water. They came at the guards from 2 directions at once. Neural stunners fired. Both guards dropped. The hostages screamed, not understanding what was happening. We're here to help, Lisa said in Althaxi language. She had learned basic phrases before the mission. Stay calm. You're safe now. 7 minutes and 43 seconds after Ghost Company entered the compound, it was over. All 17 Zorvat guards were unconscious or restrained. 200 hostages were safe. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single person was dead or seriously injured. Commander Telvik watched the rescue footage 3 times before he believed it was real. How? He kept asking. How did you do this? Lisa didn't answer that question. Instead, she asked one of her own. Commander, would you like to learn? That was how Wraith Squadron was born. 15 young Dalari volunteers who wanted to learn human special operations tactics. The Dalari government approved the training program, and Sergeant Kyle Martinez was assigned as their instructor. Kyle was 28, had been in Special Forces for 7 years, and had a talent for teaching. He understood that techniques were less important than mindset. Anyone could learn to shoot a weapon or clear a room. Teaching someone to think like a special operator was harder. The Dalari trainees were eager but confused. Their culture valued direct confrontation and visible courage. On the first day of training, one of them, a young male named Varric, asked the question Kyle had been expecting. Sergeant Martinez, why do we hide? Varric asked. Why don't we face our enemies with honor? Kyle took them to a training room. He set up a scenario. At one end of the room was a simulated enemy position with automated defenders. At the other end was an objective they needed to reach. Varric, Kyle said, assault that position the honorable way. Direct confrontation. Let them see you coming. Varric nodded and charged across the room. The automated defenders lit him up with training markers in 3 seconds. He was dead before he made it halfway. Now, Kyle said, watch this. He moved along the edge of the room using cover, staying low. He threw a small device that created a flash of light and sound at the opposite corner. The automated defenders turned toward it. Kyle moved while they were distracted, reached the objective, and completed the mission without being detected. Which method saved more lives? Kyle asked. The honorable charge that got you killed? Or the dishonorable sneak that completed the mission? But I looked brave when I charged, Varric said. Brave corpses are still corpses, Kyle replied. Your family doesn't care how brave you looked when you died. They just care that you're dead. A special operator's first duty isn't to look courageous. It's to come home. The concept was difficult for the Dalari. Their entire culture was built on visible heroism. But slowly, over weeks and months, they began to understand. Courage wasn't about being seen. It was about doing what needed to be done, even if no one ever knew about it. 3 months into their training, Wraith Squadron got their first real mission. A rogue Krell warband had attacked a civilian transport. 26 civilians were trapped on the damaged ship. The Krell were demanding ransom. The Dalari military wanted to send a battle group. Standard protocol. Announce their intention to fight. Give the Krell time to prepare their defense, then engage in honorable combat. Kyle asked for 12 hours. He took Wraith Squadron and showed them how to plan a real mission. They studied the transport systems. They identified weaknesses in the Krell boarding party's position. They found a way to access the transport through a damaged airlock that the Krell had dismissed as unusable. Varric led his team through that airlock. They moved through the transport's damaged corridors, avoiding the Krell patrols. When they reached the civilian hostages, they didn't announce themselves. They didn't give the Krell a chance to respond. They created a distraction at one end of the ship, drawing most of the Krell away. Then they evacuated the hostages through an emergency escape route the Krell didn't even know existed. By the time the Krell realized what was happening, the civilians were safe on a rescue ship. The rogue warband had no hostages, no leverage, and no choice but to surrender. The Dalari celebrated. But more importantly, they understood. Wraith Squadron had saved lives not through superior firepower or brave charges, but through knowledge, patience, and smart tactics. Word spread. Other species heard about Ghost Company's rescue, about Wraith Squadron's success, about human special operations doctrine that could win fights without battles and save enemies from themselves. 47 different species requested human military advisors. The Council, which had tried to put humanity on trial 6 months earlier, quietly approved those requests. They didn't admit they were wrong. They just stopped questioning human methods. But in private chambers, in conversations that weren't recorded, Council leaders asked each other the same question. If humans could do this much with 30 operators, what could they do with 300? With 3,000? And the most frightening question of all, What if they decided to use these tactics not to help but to conquer? General Alex Brennan looked at the message on his screen and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. The Vryn had issued a formal challenge, questioning whether human special operations tactics would work against a truly professional military force. They wanted proof that 14,000 years of military tradition could stand against human innovation. They want a war game, Alex said to his staff. They think we got lucky against the Krell. Colonel Amy Vasquez, now his second-in-command, shook her head. The Vryn aren't the Krell. They're disciplined, experienced, and they've been perfecting military doctrine since before humans left caves. This won't be easy. Good, Alex said. Easy doesn't teach anyone anything. The war game was scheduled to take place on Nexus 4, an uninhabited planet with varied terrain. The rules were simple. Both sides would have a target facility to either defend or capture. The side that achieved their objective with minimal casualties would win. No actual deaths, of course. All weapons would be set to training mode, marking hits instead of causing real damage. Fleet Master Kandros arrived at the planning meeting with an attitude of polite superiority. The Vryn were tall, with silver skin and 4 eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. They had been the military backbone of the Council for millennia. They knew they were the best. General Brennan, Kandros said, "We will field 5,000 soldiers. Standard battle doctrine. We will defend the target facility. You may bring whatever forces you deem appropriate." "I'll bring 32 operators," Alex said. Kandros blinked all 4 eyes in sequence, which was the Vryn equivalent of laughter. 32? Against 5,000? "I admire your confidence, but this seems unwise." "We'll see," Alex said. He called Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos into his office that night. She was young for her rank, only 30 years old, but she had earned it. Apex Team was the newest special operations unit, formed from the best operators in the entire military. "They specialized in impossible missions, Maria," Alex said. "I'm sending you against 5,000 Vryn with 31 other operators. You have 3 days to win. Any questions?" "Just one, sir," Maria said. "What are the actual rules?" "Not the official ones. The real ones." Alex appreciated that question. It showed she understood the game within the game. The Vryn will follow every rule perfectly. They'll set up textbook defensive positions, maintain proper patrol schedules, and execute doctrine exactly as written. That's their strength and their weakness. "Predictability," Maria said. "Exactly. They've spent 14,000 years perfecting their methods. They won't deviate. They can't imagine that someone would approach warfare from a completely different direction." Maria nodded slowly. "Don't attack the defense. Attack the assumptions behind the defense." Now you're thinking like a special operator. The war game began at dawn on the 3rd day. The Vryn had used the preparation time well. They had established a perimeter around the target facility with overlapping fields of fire. They had sensor nets monitoring all approaches. They had aerial patrols maintaining constant vigilance. Their forces were positioned in depth, with reserves ready to respond to any breach. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Exactly what any military academy in the galaxy would teach. Apex Team watched all of this from a distance. They didn't move toward the facility. They didn't probe the defenses. They just watched and took notes. "They rotate patrols every 4 hours," Maria observed. "Same routes, same timing. They probably think consistency is a strength." Lieutenant Gary Nelson, her second-in-command, pointed at the sensor net. "That coverage looks complete, but it's standard commercial equipment. Built for detecting ships and vehicles, not individual people moving slowly. And they're set up to defend against a frontal assault." Sergeant Carla Phillips added, "Multiple defensive lines, all facing outward. They're not expecting anyone to already be inside." Maria smiled. "Then let's not disappoint them." The first thing Apex Team did was nothing. For an entire day, they stayed hidden in the hills surrounding the facility. They watched the Vryn patrols, timing them down to the second. They observed shift changes, noting who was alert and who was tired. They identified communication patterns and supply routes. The Vryn kept waiting for the attack. It didn't come. On the second day, 3 operators moved. Not toward the facility, but toward the Vryn supply depot 5 miles away. This depot wasn't part of the war game officially, but it was where the Vryn were getting their food, water, and equipment. Corporals Tim Baker and Jenny Moore accessed the depot's computer system through a maintenance terminal that had been left unsecured. They didn't steal anything. They just changed some inventory records. According to the system, the depot was now critically low on water purification tablets and field rations. The Vrin logistics officers, following proper procedure, immediately ordered emergency supplies, but the emergency supplies were also redirected by Apex Team's cyber warfare specialists. They would arrive but 3 days late. Meanwhile, another group of operators found the communication relay station that the Vrin were using. Again, they didn't destroy it. They just installed a small device that would introduce a 2-second delay into all transmissions. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to create confusion during fast-moving situations. On the 3rd day, the real operation began. But not where the Vrin expected. A small team led by Lieutenant Oscar Cruz approached the target facility from the north, moving slowly through a dry riverbed that the Vrin sensors had difficulty monitoring. They didn't try to breach the perimeter. They just planted evidence that they had tried. False tracks, abandoned equipment, traces of electronic signals. The Vrin detected this immediately. They repositioned forces to strengthen the northern approach. It was exactly what Doctrine demanded. While they were repositioning, Maria's main team moved. But not toward the facility. They went underground, through a cave system that the initial survey had shown but that the Vrin had dismissed as too difficult to navigate. The caves were tight, dark, and dangerous, perfect for special operations soldiers who trained for exactly these conditions. It took 6 hours to traverse the caves. When Apex Team emerged, they were inside the Vrin defensive perimeter. Not at the edge, but deep inside, past all the sensors and patrols and defensive positions. They moved through the facility like ghosts. The Vrin had guards, but those guards were watching outward. No one was watching the maintenance tunnels. No one was checking the air filtration systems. No one thought to secure the underground storage areas. Apex Team placed markers on every critical system: power generation, life support, command and control. They documented every vulnerability. They showed how easily they could have disabled everything. Then they did something the Vrin never expected. They hacked into the facility's security system and changed all the access codes. When the Vrin tried to enter their own command center the next morning, they found themselves locked out. At the same time, the communication delay device activated fully. Vrin commanders trying to coordinate their forces found their messages arriving seconds late. Orders were executed out of sequence. Units became confused about their objectives. The supply shortage hit. Soldiers who expected fresh rations found only minimal supplies. Water purification became an issue. Nothing critical, nothing dangerous, but enough to lower morale and create doubt. And then the defensive turrets that the Vrin had positioned so carefully began changing their targeting parameters. Not dramatically, just slightly, enough that they no longer covered the exact angles the Vrin had calculated. Fleetmaster Kandros stood in his command post, trying to understand what was happening. His 5,000 soldiers were positioned perfectly. Their defenses were textbook, but somehow 32 humans had infiltrated the facility, taken control of critical systems, and demonstrated that they could have ended the entire operation at any moment. When did they breach the perimeter? Kandros demanded. His aide checked the sensor logs. The sensors show no breach, Fleetmaster. That's impossible. They're inside the facility. Yes, Fleetmaster, but according to our systems, they never crossed the perimeter. Kandros understood then. The humans hadn't fought through his defenses. They had simply ignored them. They had found a path that wasn't covered by any doctrine, any sensor, any tactical plan. They had thought in ways that 14,000 years of military tradition had never considered. The war game ended when Maria walked into the command post. She wasn't armed. She didn't need to be. She simply presented Fleetmaster Kandros with a datapad showing everywhere Apex Team had been. Every system they had accessed, every vulnerability they had exploited. In a real engagement, Maria said quietly, "Your entire force would have been neutralized 36 hours ago. We could have disabled life support, destroyed communications, and left you stranded. We didn't because the goal wasn't to defeat you. It was to show you that there are ways of fighting you've never imagined." Kandros looked at the datapad. Then he looked at Maria. His 4 eyes showed something humans rarely saw in Vrin. Fear. How many humans can do what you do? He asked. Enough, Maria said. The footage of the war game spread across the galaxy faster than any news had ever traveled. Every species that had served on the council, every military academy that had taught traditional warfare, every general who had believed in the old ways, all of them watched 32 humans defeat 5,000 Vryn without firing a shot. The debates that followed were intense. Some species argued that human tactics were still dishonorable. Others countered that tactics which saved lives couldn't be dishonorable. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was capable of. They had seen humans as newcomers, as primitives who stumbled into space with more luck than skill. Now they saw the truth. Humans were survivors of thousands of years of brutal warfare. They had developed tactics and strategies through blood and necessity. And they had brought those lessons to a galaxy that had forgotten what real war meant. The council called another emergency session, but this time they weren't putting humanity on trial. They were asking for help. Because if humans could do this to the Vryn, they could do it to anyone. And every species in the galaxy suddenly realized they needed to either learn from humans or become irrelevant. The Vryn Accords were amended that month. New sections were added covering unconventional warfare, special operations, and asymmetric tactics. But the amendments included something else. Strict guidelines on when and how such tactics could be used. Oversight, accountability, limitations. Because the galaxy had learned something terrifying. In a universe where honor and tradition had governed warfare for 14,000 years, humanity had shown that the deadliest warriors were the ones who ignored tradition entirely. And that kind of power needed rules because without them, humans wouldn't just win wars. They would make war itself meaningless. The emergency transmission came through every council channel at once. The Krell hegemony had launched simultaneous attacks on 6 neutral worlds. Not military targets, civilian populations. Cities burned, hospitals were destroyed. Millions died in the first 3 hours. The Krell weren't trying to win territory or resources. They were trying to prove they were still feared. Admiral Nicole Cortez watched the footage from her office on Earth. Each screen showed a different world dying. She had seen war before, had commanded operations across a dozen systems, but this was different. This was deliberate slaughter. This was genocide. Her aide, Commander Paul Griffin, stood beside her. The Council is demanding we deploy Special Operations Forces. They want us to end this like we ended the last Krell offensive. I know what they want, Nicole said. She didn't look away from the screens. Couldn't look away. Those were real people dying. Real children, real families, real lives ending in fire. Admiral, we could stop this, Paul said. Apex team could eliminate the Krell leadership in 72 hours. Ghost Company could disable every military installation they have. We could end the Krell as a threat permanently. I know, Nicole said again. Then why aren't we moving? Nicole finally turned away from the screens. She looked tired, older than her 53 years. Because we can't. Not this time. Ma'am, with respect, millions of people are dying. And billions more would die if we do what you're suggesting. Nicole sat down heavily. Paul, do you know why every species in this galaxy fears us? Because we're effective. No, because we're too effective. Because they've realized that if we wanted to, we could end any of them in days without them ever knowing we were there. That fear is useful sometimes. But fear without trust is just waiting for betrayal. Paul didn't understand. Nicole could see it in his face. He was a good officer, skilled and dedicated. But he was also young. He hadn't lived through the wars she had seen. Hadn't made the choices that kept her awake at night. I need you to call an emergency council session, Nicole said. Full broadcast. Every species needs to hear this. 2 hours later, Nicole stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was packed, representatives from every member species. Behind them, billions watched on their worlds. Everyone wanted to know what humanity would do. The Krell have committed an atrocity, Nicole began. They have murdered millions of innocent people. They deserve justice. They deserve to face consequences for their actions. She paused. But humanity will not provide that justice. The chamber erupted. Voices shouted in dozens of languages. The representatives of the 6 attacked worlds were screaming, demanding to know why humanity would abandon them. Nicole waited for the noise to fade. Eldest Mora struck her gavel repeatedly until something like order returned. You would let them continue? Senator Quillix demanded. You would allow this slaughter? No, Nicole said. I'm saying that humanity won't be the ones to stop them. Not in the way you want. She activated a holographic display. It showed plans. Detailed, precise plans for operations against the Krell. Assassination targets. Infrastructure vulnerabilities. Communication networks that could be compromised. Every weakness in the Krell hegemony laid out with surgical precision. This is what we could do, Nicole said. Apex Team could eliminate every member of the Krell High Command within 3 days. Ghost Company could disable every military base they operate. Our cyber warfare specialists could crash their entire technological infrastructure. Within 1 week, the Krell hegemony would cease to exist as a functional government. Then do it, someone shouted. And what happens next? Nicole asked. We prove to the galaxy that humanity can destroy any species, any government, any civilization we choose. We prove that your survival depends on our mercy. Is that the galaxy you want to live in? Silence fell over the chamber. Major Jake Morrison walked onto the platform. He had been promoted again, now serving as one of Nicole's senior advisors. He looked out at the assembled representatives and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the entire space. My team was the first to show the galaxy what human special operations could do, Jake said. We took Delmar Station without killing anyone. We thought we were being merciful. And we were. But we were also showing you something else. We were showing you that we could reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. That no defense could stop us. That your safety existed only because we chose to let it exist. He pulled up another display. This one showed Earth. Specifically, it showed images from human history. Mushroom clouds rising over cities. Photographs of weapons capable of ending all life on the planet. Humans developed the ability to destroy ourselves completely, Jake continued. We built weapons that could crack continents and poison the air for generations. We came within minutes of using them, multiple times, and then we chose not to. We chose to step back from that edge. We created treaties, dismantled weapons, and swore never to cross that line again. What does this have to do with the Krell? Quillix asked. Everything, Jake said, because we learned something through that experience. We learned that the most powerful weapons are the ones you choose not to use. That real strength isn't about having the ability to destroy your enemies. It's about having that ability and choosing a different path. Nicole took over again. If we destroy the Krell the way you want, we become exactly what you fear. We become the species that can end anyone who displeases us. And once we cross that line, there's no going back. You'll never trust us again. You'll spend every day wondering when we'll decide you're the next problem to solve. So you do nothing? The Delari Chancellor said. Her voice shook with emotion. My people are dying right now. Every minute we debate, more die. And you speak of philosophy? No, Nicole said. We speak of responsibility. And we offer an alternative. A new figure walked onto the platform. Major Ben Harris, Jake's old second-in-command. Now overseeing special operations training programs across the galaxy. He carried a datapad. The Krell leadership is meeting in their capital city in 6 hours, Ben said. We know this because we've been monitoring their communications for the past year. Not to attack them. To understand them. To be ready for moments like this. He showed a route on the display. A path through the Krell capital that avoided all security. All guards, all defenses. One human operator could reach that meeting room, Ben said. Could walk in while they're planning their next attack. Could show them exactly how vulnerable they are. Could prove that their lives continue only because we allow it. And then what? Eldest Mora asked. And then we offer them a choice, Nicole said. Withdraw from the attacked worlds. Submit to council arbitration. Accept justice through proper channels. And in return, we won't use our capabilities against them. We won't end them. We'll let them survive, but only if they agree to change. They'll refuse, Quillix said. The Krell respect only strength. Showing mercy will make them think you're weak. Then we show them both, Jake said. Strength and mercy. We prove we could destroy them. Then we prove we're choosing not to. And we make it clear that this choice is conditional on their behavior. The council debated for hours. Some species wanted human intervention. Others feared what it would mean if humanity became the galaxy's executioner. But eventually they reached a decision. They would allow humanity to try their approach. Major Ben Harris took a single ship to Krell space. Not a warship. A small diplomatic vessel with minimal weapons. He traveled alone, which terrified his security team but was necessary for the message he needed to send. The Krell leadership was meeting in their war chamber when Ben walked in. He hadn't announced himself, hadn't requested permission. He simply appeared in the most secure room on their home world, surrounded by their most elite guards, and calmly placed a data pad on the conference table. The Krell warriors drew their weapons. The High Commander shouted orders, but Ben didn't move. He just waited. That pad contains 36 different plans for operations against your civilization, Ben said calmly. Each one would effectively end the Krell hegemony within 1 week. I've also marked the locations where 32 human operators are currently positioned throughout your territory. They've been there for 6 months. You never detected them. The High Commander grabbed the pad. His hand shook as he scrolled through the information. Every plan was complete, detailed down to the minute. Entry points for their bunkers, vulnerabilities in their security systems, the daily schedules of every important leader, proof that humanity could reach anyone, anytime. Why haven't you used these plans? The High Commander asked. Because we don't want to, Ben said simply. Humanity could end your species. We could do it quickly, efficiently, with minimal risk to our own forces. But we're choosing not to, because we believe that justice should come through proper channels, not through assassination and sabotage. You think we'll surrender because you show mercy? One of the Krell generals laughed. Mercy is weakness, no, Ben said. Mercy is a choice that only the strong can make. You murder civilians because you have the power to do so. We could murder your entire leadership, but we're choosing not to. Which of us is actually demonstrating strength? He pulled up another image on a larger screen. It showed the 6 worlds the Krell had attacked. The death tolls, the destruction, the suffering. Withdraw your forces, Ben said. Submit to council justice. Face consequences for your actions through legitimate channels. Do this and humanity will not use our capabilities against you. Refuse and we will remove you from power so completely that the Krell hegemony will become a cautionary tale that parents tell their children. And if we kill you right now? The High Commander asked. If we make you pay for this insult? Ben smiled slightly. Then the 32 operators I mentioned will receive orders to proceed with Plan 7. I won't tell you what Plan 7 is, but I will tell you that it involves your entire governmental structure, and it will be completed before my body grows cold. So please decide carefully. The Krell leaders looked at each other. For the first time in their history, they felt truly helpless. They had always relied on strength, on intimidation, on the belief that violence could solve any problem. But humanity had shown them something different. A kind of power that didn't require violence. A strength that came from choosing not to use overwhelming force. 3 days later, the Krell withdrew from all 6 worlds. They agreed to face a council tribunal. They accepted limitations on their military and oversight of their government. They didn't surrender because they were defeated in battle. They surrendered because they realized they had already lost. They just hadn't known it yet. The galaxy processed this in different ways. Some species saw it as weakness, humanity pulling back when they should have struck. Others saw it as wisdom, understanding that some victories cost more than they gain. But most saw it as something else. They saw a species that had developed the most effective military tactics in galactic history, and then chose to limit themselves. That had taught the galaxy how to fight in shadows, and then explained why sometimes you shouldn't. That had proven they could destroy anyone, and then decided that destruction wasn't the goal. 5 years later, the galaxy had changed completely. 47 species operated special operations forces trained by human instructors. Wars that once lasted decades now ended in weeks. Casualty counts dropped by orders of magnitude. The old ways of warfare, with their emphasis on honor and tradition over effectiveness, had been replaced by something new. Something that valued precision and results, but humanity also insisted on something else. Every training program included extensive instruction on ethics, restraint, and responsibility. Every special operations unit learned not just how to fight, but when to fight and when to choose another path. Human instructors taught tactics and philosophy in equal measure. Major Jake Morrison retired from active duty and became the head of the Galactic Special Operations Academy on Earth. His most popular class was called The Decision Not to Fire. In it, he taught young operators from a dozen different species about the weight of power, the importance of restraint, and the understanding that the deadliest warriors were often the ones who never pulled the trigger. On graduation day, Jake would give the same speech he had given for 5 years. He would stand before hundreds of new special operators and tell them something simple but profound. "You are now among the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy," he would say. "You can infiltrate any defense, overcome any obstacle, eliminate any target. You are trained to win against impossible odds. But I want you to remember something else. The most important mission you'll ever complete is the one where you find a way to win without fighting. The greatest victory you'll ever achieve is the one where everyone walks away alive. Because anyone can learn to kill efficiently. True professionals learn when not to kill at all." The galaxy no longer called human special forces Extinction in uniform as an insult. They called them that as a reminder of what they could be, and a testament to what they chose not to be. They had shown the cosmos that the future of warfare wasn't about perfecting the ability to destroy, but about developing the wisdom to choose mercy. And when the next great threat emerged from beyond known space, when something truly dangerous came to challenge the galaxy, every species knew exactly who to call, not because humans were the most vicious warriors, but because they were the only ones who had learned that true victory wasn't measured in enemies defeated, but in lives saved, including the lives of their enemies.